So let's begin. This prayer is from Saint Teresa of Avila. May today there be peace within. May you trust God that you are exactly where you are meant to be. May you not forget the infinite possibilities that are born of faith. May you use those gifts that you have received and pass on the love that has been given to you. May you be content knowing that you are a child of God. Let this presence settle into your bones and allow your soul the freedom to sing, dance, praise, and love. It is there for each and every one of us. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you. I don't know that I've ever heard that.
That was very beautiful.
Yeah. Send me a copy.
I shall.
Thank you. Well, we can go ahead and get started with introductions. So Sister Judy and Katie, I'll let you begin, and then Merritt and I will just briefly share who we are.
Okay. Well, I'm Sister Judy Blizzard, Judith Marie Blizzard, and I am a vocation director with Sister Desiree in the discernment area. And I do spiritual direction retreats, and I'm mission leader of our Mooncrest neighborhood programs right down the street, where I had the joy of being today outside with the children, and I'm glad to be here.
Yes.
And I'm Katie Rotterman. I'm a postulant with the Felician Sisters. I started my postulancy in February of this year, and I've been in Laredo, Texas ever since then. I'm excited to be here too.
Great. We're both excited that you're both here.
I'm Mary Donahue. I am a part owner of a coffee shop in Pittsburgh. If anyone wants to get coffee, DeFair Coffee and Tea. And I went to Our Lady of the Sacred Heart High School, which is a Felician-based school in Moon Township, and that's kind of how I was introduced to the sisters, and specifically Sister Desiree.
And I'm Sister Desiree on the vocation team with the Felician Sisters, and grew up in New Mexico, currently living in Pennsylvania, and always sad when it's cold. That's about it. I always wanted to be hot. So since Merritt, you liked some of my questions, maybe I'll let you start out with the question.
I get where do I even begin? So let's talk about how maybe to start things off, how you both found the sisters, and maybe about like your story about like entering into discernment. I think would be a nice little intro of how you both got to kind of like where you are today.
I defer to Katie.
Alrighty then. So I met the sisters in high school. There's a Felician who works at my family's home parish in the Buffalo, New York area, which is where I'm from. And it was around high school when I kind of had this idea that like maybe this is where I was going to end up. But I was going to college and, you know, wanted to do some years of service afterwards and really needed to figure life out. So I had met Sister Joyce, and actually later on found out that I like interviewed other Felicians for different projects in high school without quite realizing they were from the same community. And years later, when I realized that I still had this thought of, oh, I think I'm gonna like end up in the convent in like a good way. I know that sounds kind of fatalistic, but I started visiting other orders and really dove into my spiritual life and came back up for air and was like, well, I always liked Sister Joyce. She had a good head on her shoulders and was very happy, and contacted the current vocations director at the time. This would have been about 3 or so years ago now. Went on a come and see and felt very at home right away in a way that I hadn't when I had visited other communities. And as I continued to discern, trying to get an answer to this question that I'd been asking for many years, and knowing that if it wasn't going to be this, then my life was going to change in some other way because it was time. I just kept thinking, well, this seems good. This seems good. And I kept finding more invitations to keep coming back and to keep growing. And then they pushed me a little bit, and I started to become I became a candidate and entered into deeper discernment, learning more about the sisters, and it all seemed good. And I kept growing, and then I quit my job and moved to Texas. So to start postulancy. But it really was, I mean, it took many years to get to the point where I was in a space to really engage in the process in a healthy way and to know myself. And I'm still growing in that. But it's been a journey of growth and a journey of faith.
Awesome. Thank you.
And I have to say that mine too began in high school. I had always wanted to be a missionary, and not so much as I never thought about being a sister though. When I was in my junior year of high school, I had already made up my mind that I was going to go to college, take a couple years off and do missionary work and find the man of my dreams, get married and have children. And so my senior year in high school, my religion teacher asked me if I ever thought about being a sister. And I was, no. And I never did. But his question kept staying with me, and I couldn't get rid of that question. And I kept thinking about it. And I spent a lot of time in church because I was the cantor. So I thought, well, it doesn't hurt to try it, you know? So I went on a come and see with the Franciscans in Aston, Pennsylvania, and left there a little confused because I enjoyed my time there with the sisters. And then, I don't know, somehow one of the sisters from my parish who were Felician sisters found out that I was looking into religious life. And so one of the sisters' mothers asked me if I ever thought I should look at the Felicians first after all they taught me. So I went on a come and see, and we had adoration. And Sister Marilyn was the vocation director at the time. Actually, it was Sister Janet, but Sister Marilyn was sitting next to me in a circle. And that whole day I was crying because I was so confused, and I thought, I don't want to be a sister. But I could feel this draw. And Sister Marilyn looked at me and she said, "What is wrong with you?" You know, because I was just kept crying. And I said, "I don't want to be a sister." And she says, "Okay." But when I left there, my mom, when I went home, she said, "Something happened to you." And I said, "Yeah," but I didn't say what it was. And I kept going back to the sisters, having prayers with them, supper with them. This is with the sisters in Aston, and went more to Lodi. And I realized that this truly was where God was calling me. So that's how, but the sisters taught me, the Felician sisters taught me in grammar school. And I hung out with them after school, putting up bulletin boards and stuff, but I never had thought I would be one, and I'm grateful now.
That's so cool. Sister Judy, just just because I'm curious, do you find most or like a certain amount of women who do enter, do you have a correlation with the sisters in high school? Like when they're of the high school age who enter, or is there like, because I know you probably get all walks of life, but for me, I feel like from a lot of sisters, like a common denominator is, oh, I already knew one from like when I was in high school or something like that. Do you find that happens a lot?
Not so much today,
Mhm.
except for Monica, who's a candidate with us right now. She had that experience with Sister Desiree as her teacher. But many of them today don't necessarily have that physical contact with us. That's why we invite them to our home for a while
That's
to
awesome.
have that experience.
That's awesome. And Sister Desiree, Monica, I met her, correct?
Yeah, she was in Pittsburgh for a little bit and came over to Emily's, like a gathering. Yeah.
That's what I thought. She is the sweetest.
She is.
Oh my God. She's just like, you meet her and you're just like, you instantly smile. There's nothing else to do besides that.
Yeah,
Very
a
good
ball of
description.
energy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you both for sharing. And I was thinking maybe you could both share also, because you know, Sister Judy, you have been in leadership as the formation director, and then right now serve on the on the vocation team. So 2 different roles, but both part of formation. And then Katie, you're in formation. So you could talk about your different experiences and what you see God does, or what the community is like creating in order to bring God into that space. Does that make sense? Where is God in there? Spiritual question.
Where is God in there? Well, being in the role of being part of the vocation team in discernment, and that also being in that other role of being the formator on the council, I see a hunger in women that want to serve God. And some of them are already serving God in many beautiful ways, but they're looking for more. So they look into religious life. And when they take that journey, it's going to be a journey of mystery, because like I said before, some of them have not had that experience of sister in high school or grammar school or any part of their life. They might have met Sister Desiree or some other sister that sparked that idea that they wanted to be more for God. And so they start the journey with us in conversation, and we invite them to come and be part of us for a little bit if they haven't had that experience. And during that time of being with us, some of them decide, I love this. And it touches into what's that hunger or that desire is. And some of them realize, nah, maybe a different type of religious life, not necessarily the Felicians, but maybe some other, because they didn't feel that sense of being at home. That's usually the feel that is described. They have a sense of being at home when they're with the sisters. And so they ask to become a candidate. And then that means they take the first step, but not necessarily live with the sisters. They're in their life as a student or in the work field or some ministry, and they come in contact with the candidate director on a regular basis. And after about 1 or 2 years of that, then they request to go further. And as they go along in the journey, each step of the way, they have a director to help them to learn about who we are as Felician sisters, but also to learn about who they are. And is this a fit? Is this something that is life-giving for them? You know, and each time they move on to postulancy, novitiate, first profession, they're guided along, and they have many experiences of us as Felician sisters, whether in our ministry or community gatherings, and they learn more about who we are and how they fit into our Felician story. Did I answer that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I like that you said that people like me, I guess, and all of us, you know, see that moment of wanting to be more for God. And I think something I've realized over these past few months of postulancy is God knocking and saying, let me be more for you.
Yeah.
Because it really has been, I think without realizing it, before I had entered, you know, my spiritual life was like very nice, but like it was kind of in its own little place. And there are people that I talked about it with, and I saw a spiritual director, but like it was kind of its own thing. And being here, living in community, praying in community, going through this formation, it is seeing God in so much more, in the way that we eat our meals together, and the homework or the projects I have to do for class and everything. And it's really been this, you know, like God being everywhere, and I think an invitation for me to notice and let him be bigger than what I had perhaps initially imagined. And it's a little scary sometimes, but it's good. You know, that growth and change gets that way a little bit sometimes.
Yeah, Katie, for you, what's been the biggest challenge for you so far?
I think the biggest challenge has really been learning to accept how holistic formation is. I think, and I probably should have known better, but you know, hindsight is 2020. I think I thought it was going to be largely like an intellectual and spiritual endeavor. And it's really been, you know, this challenge to grow, to be happy, holy, and healthy, like in every aspect of my life, which is like, you know, outside of like the chapel and how I understand the community, but like it is, how do I interact with that? How do we build community as the three of us here? And certainly some of it's been complicated by the pandemic, and you know, that's added its own set of challenges to my particular timing. But I do think some of it really has been being open to that growth, like all the way around, and looking at you know, some occasionally like hard areas of growth that I didn't really want to look at, but that I know are good will come there once I, you know, open up a bit more.
Definitely. Sister Judy, when you entered, do you remember like anything that was really hard for you, like your biggest challenge through your experience of discernment and formation?
The first word is obedience. I found that the most difficult as when I first came in. I was at that age, I guess, where I thought I knew better. And I, when you learn stories about St. Francis telling the novice to plant the potato or whatever it was upside down and following that, I knew on some level that's what I had to do, you know, just do what I'm asked to do and trust. I was the oldest at home, so I was I thought I was the smarty. And here I wasn't the oldest and I wasn't in charge. So it was trusting somebody else to do what I needed to be a good follower, to be a good disciple, a good Felician. So I would say obedience.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
That's hard for anyone. I think, you know, to like fully give, right? And just like fully trust. Like I can imagine like when you enter, like it would feel almost like a culture shock, right? Because like you have to do so much on your own outside, and not that you don't inside, but like just being able to give that up, that's not, and just like, okay, cool, yeah, type of thing, you know? It's a very human thing to get over that.
Mhm.
I also just real quick want to remind those who are watching that you can submit questions if you have any questions for either Sister Judy or Katie. But I also, I mean, pretty much you described it in your sharing. And after you both shared, I was like, wow, we're done. They said everything that's like, that's great. But I think, you know, if you could explain why you think formation is important for religious life, because it takes a long time. I think a lot of people don't realize it takes about 9 years to enter, you know, our community and many communities. So why do you feel like that matters?
Well, first of all, that first 9 years is really still a time of discernment. And the formation isn't just learning about the Felician way. And even though that's very important, but it's also learning about who you are before God and knowing who God is for you. And that is always a journey. It's not even just the first 9 years. You're doing that all your religious life. And what is it that what area I need to grow in? And what do I need to let go of so I could be free in my response to Christ? And sometimes you might find that later on in religious life, you came in thinking you had a pure intention and you didn't. You know, you learn that as you mature in religious life, and then you choose again for the right reasons, I would say. And it's knowing that God isn't finished with you yet. And it certainly is a journey. I remember as a young sister admiring St. Teresa, Kateri, you know, they died at 24. And so they had it all together. That's what I was thinking. And I wanted so much to have it all together, but I don't know if I wanted to die so young, you know, but it's growing into that beautiful flower, that beautiful blossom that God intended when he created you. And when we don't engage in formation or even ongoing formation, then we become stale and we're not so on fire with our love for God. And it's always enkindling that love.
I mean, I think it's important because I'm definitely not ready to make final vows yet. So I mean, just having that time to, to work through it and go through all of this, but yeah, the time is a gift. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think even to add to like both of those responses, Katie, you're saying I wouldn't be ready for final vows right now. True. When I first entered, I was like, I think I was 22, and I did the math, and I was like, I'm gonna be so old when I make final vows. Mad. But even I knew I wasn't ready until like the year that I made them. Not even 3 years before that would I have been ready. And it was the exact amount of time I needed to really say, yes, I want to commit my life to this. And, and so like as Sister Judy is saying, all those years were continued discernment, were me continuing to say, yes, I want to take the next step, or yes, I want to deepen this, or yes, I still feel, and like you said earlier, Katie, the growth, I still feel I'm becoming more of who I've always wanted to be, and so I definitely can see the value in it as well, even though it takes a long time.
We do have 2 questions in our chat box. The first one I'm going to do is, Katie, this one's for you.
Okay.
Katie, what have been some of the joys for you during this unusual postulant year? Also, 2-part, do you feel like you missed out on anything as a postulant during the pandemic?
Well, there are some things that I have missed. Just this time is also supposed to include the opportunity to engage in ministry, and because of the pandemic, that hasn't been able to happen. And I was also supposed to go and visit some other Felician convents around the country, and that hasn't been able to happen. But I think the joys and the blessings, I think, have really been, though, in that, in staying still, and staying here, there's an opportunity to, one, grow close with the sisters that I live with, because it's the 3 of us and it's pretty great. But I think too, there's also, because I'm not moving and on the road, there are things that I'm paying attention to and realizing about myself that maybe I would have put off or set aside, or I don't know, areas of growth that might have been, pushed to novitiate or something, that I can see now. And that's been very good. Also, as much as a Buffalo girl, I do love winter, and the 100-degree summers here were a struggle. It's still in the 80s, and I can go for beautiful walks every day. So that's been a joy as well.
Okay, another question for both of you. So, was it harder to embrace the concept of spiritual life or the communal life with all women? Do you find it hard living in the smaller community compared to years ago when there were more sisters? I don't know if any of you were around if there were more sisters as well, too.
Well, the interesting part about that was, living with women. I did come from 3 boys and myself and my mom and dad. But I love that. I always wanted sisters. So I always told my mom later, after I entered, I had to become a sister because I needed sisters. I never had that opportunity to have sisters. But I loved, through my convent living in the smaller community. It seemed easier for me. I like to be present to people. And when there's a lot of people, that's a lot of people to be present to. And I only experienced that really in our provincial house in Lodi, New Jersey. But I love that too. I just love being with the sisters. It didn't really matter.
Yeah, I mean, I've only really known the small convent, but I think it's been, from what I've gleaned from conversations around the dinner table, there's, I think, a different kind of like intimacy when it is just a couple of people. And I think too, it invites like a different kind of, we're still doing our grocery shopping and everything that I think looks a little different when it's a much, if there's 20 or 30 sisters in like a really big house, but there's a different kind of responsibility that we have to take for just the day-to-day activities. And I like cooking, so it's nice to be able to do that.
Yeah, and Sister Judy, can you touch on a little bit of the formation process, and just for like those who might not know or who might watch this video at another time and like stumble upon this video and talk about like, honestly, like what is formation? You know what I mean? We've been like throwing it around, but really like what that really entails, like what is going on in those 9 years, like what to expect, I guess. Because I think some people, again, just think you enter and you're like, okay, let's go. But it's actually a lot more than just like entering. That's almost just like truly the step in the door.
Yeah, and you used a good word, step. It's multiple steps before we make our final or perpetual vows. And it starts with, it's all gradual. It's a nice gradual process, I think. You get your foot in the door as a candidate, or you might be a live-in candidate. And we have that with one of our candidates now. And then after a year or two, depending on the person, you move into the community as a postulant, as Katie is doing now. And you have classes with your director, you have the experience of community life and prayer life, you have the opportunity to be part of a ministry, and that's a year or two. And you move on if you're ready, to the next phase, which is novitiate. So as a novice, the first year, it's the canonical year. And that's a more prayerful and year and a time of study, learning more about who we are as Felician sisters. Their second year, you're moving more into the vows, getting ready for that, making your first vows and living in community with others who may or may not be in your ministry when you go out of the novitiate. And then it's 6 years, normally 6 to 9, 6 years of renewing your vows every year. And you are living in ministry or studying at that time. And every so often you come together with other sisters who are temporary professed as well. You meet with your director, you have some kind of enrichment for your soul and for the ministry or the communal living or prayer life, whatever aspect of religious life that the director thinks that you may need some more education in or formation. It's really a time of deepening your knowledge of yourself, you're deepening your knowledge of community, and you're deepening your knowledge of God. And I would say not just knowledge, but love. And if it doesn't feel like a good fit and you find that you're unhappy And that's the hardest thing for the formator, is noticing that somebody's not truly happy or free or themselves, and helping that person to come to see that this may not be the life that God is calling you to.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a lot to go through. I just wanted to make sure, because I'm not sure how long these will take to answer, but we do have 2 really good questions in the little Q&A box. Oh, 3 actually. There's a lot. I want to make sure they just keep on rolling. I love it. I love it. So the first, and I believe either of you could definitely answer these if anyone wants to like raise a hand, or you can both answer the same question. The first one is, well, Sister Judy, this is going to be for you. When you speak of classes, what are these classes? Are they spiritual, biblical, or academic?
They are probably all of those.
Yeah.
Right, Katie?
Oh, yes.
So why don't you share what you're learning this year as a postulant?
Yeah. Let's see. So I've studied the foundress of the Felicians. So we've read some of the biographies of Blessed Mary Angela. I've also been learning a lot about Franciscan spirituality and reading some of Francis's writings, but also a book about how maybe Francis would have lived his life today. What else? We've done other things.
Prayer?
Yeah, a little bit on prayer.
Liturgy?
So we haven't done a ton on that. I came in with a theology background,
Oh,
so there were some things that were that maybe would be part of other postulancy programs. So they're like, oh, if you already know this, we don't need to start with this. So we dived a little bit more into that. But yeah, some about prayer, and some even too, I mean, we talked about theology of the body and talking about, some of those other components that aren't necessarily, Sister Christina's helping us out.
She's giving you some.
Yeah, Saint Felix, who we're named after, talking about the vows. So it's really been all encompassing and kind of not entirely academic, because it's been a little bit more about reflecting on these things and how they fit or don't fit with me, and how they fit in the Felician charism. So
yeah, and as you go on, scripture, Franciscanism, the more about the vows, about communal life, personality. I don't know, what else, Sister Desiree?
It's been a long time.
Yeah.
I remember we watched some Ronald Rothheiser. We've learned on Sister Christina typed emotional intelligence.
Yeah, spirituality.
Yeah. And then we did have another question. What advice would you give someone who wants to explore religious life but is still kind of skittish around sisters because of church trauma?
I would say to come and visit and see how it feels, to dialogue with a sister that you might feel more comfortable with, minister. And it doesn't even have to be with the group that you feel attracted to, but to join in some kind of church ministry with a sister, so you can learn about who she is and why she's a sister, and even go on the internet and watch Sister Desiree dance, or do a day in the life of a sister. There's so many things on the internet. Yeah, I would just ease in and gradually get to know That's how I think most of us that had sisters even in school, you were frightened in a sense to have that sister relationship. I mean, to approach the sister after school. But if sister said, would you like to help me after school? That gave us the opportunity to get to know the sisters in a different way. She wasn't our teacher at that point. She was somebody else. She was sister. And we got to know who she was, what she liked, and saw her in a whole different light. And that's attractive.
I was gonna say, I know I'm personally not at a point of like discernment right now, but if I could partially answer this question, if you are wanting to explore religious life and you're a little skittish because of a past trauma, something that we talked about this week is just like, if there is any type of inkling in you, that is the Lord's invitation. And maybe you aren't meant to be a sister, but maybe this is his way of healing that trauma for you as well. And this could just be a great start for your heart to heal as well. So if you have any inkling at all, like Sister Judy says, like, it doesn't have to be all at once. Like, you don't have to go running, knocking on the door tonight, but you totally can if you want. But just opening the door is that small step, and could be healing your heart in a way that you didn't even know was possible.
Thank you, Merritt.
Yeah.
That was very good.
Yeah.
There's another question as well too. I love them. They're just rolling it. So many sisters have entered into the community at a young age. What would have been the oldest to join the community, and how was it for them to leave that life they were accustomed to and live as one second, let me reread that. Many sisters have entered into the community at a young age. I think they're asking what's the oldest you can join the community? And for that person, whoever the oldest was it really hard for them to get accustomed to living in community if they're entering at like an older age?
I believe it is harder for the older woman to join because they're so used to living a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more of letting go, more of readjusting. I think that because I was only 19 when I entered, it wasn't so hard. But remember, I said I had a little difficulty with obedience. So I can't even imagine after living on your own for a long time and then coming in. It's not impossible because some women have come older. I don't know what's the oldest, but I know some women have come older and they are doing well, and others have found it very difficult.
Mm-hmm. That's all our questions in the box, but we do have 2 comments. Someone said, I appreciate Sister Judy mentioning ongoing formation and the importance of continued growth so that we don't become stagnant. And then another comment, Sister Judith talked about formation. Yes, no matter how long you are a sister or how old you are in continuous formation. Rubbing shoulders with the other sisters helps to form everyone. We are a small cosmos in the larger world. We are not saints, just saints in the making.
Yeah, amen.
I wanted to read those. I liked them a lot.
That's true. That's the gift of sister, the gift of community. They help, our sisters help us to grow. and it keeps us humble.
Yeah.
They keep us humble.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I was, that question earlier about, is it difficult to enter with, and live with all women? And I didn't grow up with brothers. I grew up with 2 younger sisters, and I adore my younger sisters, and I love having more sisters. So, I had the opposite experience growing up, but I still appreciate sisters. And so it's, and like we're talking about growth, I feel that we are peers, that it's not like, while I have mentors in community, it's not like I'm just a, little Desiree, but I'm Sister Desiree with my sisters, and that I have valuable input, but that I know my sisters also have valuable input. And so it's a constant receiving and giving. And I think that's probably part of the growth too, is knowing, like Sister Judy, you said, to be humble and say, okay, I don't always have the answers. I don't always have the best ideas. They're good, but maybe they're not the best, and to know that I can listen to my sisters. And same on the vocation team. That's why I love the team that I work with, is that we all have really good ideas and input, and we listen to each other, and we correct each other's documents and different things. And it's something else.
I feel like I had a question. I need to look back. I definitely had one. This is like my constant just stream of thoughts, because I feel like I always have questions, and then someone says something, I'm like, now I have another question. Oh, I remember. Anyone can answer this one. Was there, whether you're information now or after it, or you're now the director of formation, was there any part of it that really surprised you, that deepened your faith in a way? I mean, I know the whole process, probably you're definitely not the same person as when you entered, but was there any part of the process where you were like mind blown, that you were deepened in such a way that you weren't expecting? It could be no as well. For sure.
Well, okay. I always feel like I'm answering. That's why I didn't want to jump in, but I'm an extrovert, so I do have a realization that happened to me, and it was, I had taught for about 15 years, and I was asked to do vocation ministry, and I didn't feel that was where I wanted to go. I wanted to go. And what happened was, when I went to my spiritual director to discern this and to work this out within myself, she assured me that I had the gifts for doing that ministry. And my provincial at the time had that thought too, that I would be good for the ministry. And it was hard for me to leave something I had grown to really love and appreciate in the teaching ministry. I didn't even know I could be a teacher like that. And here I was asked to be vocation minister. That was such an eye-opener for me, and very formative of how God calls you from one thing to the next. And then from there, he calls you to something else. And each time along the way, there's new knowledge and gifts that are manifested, and it prepares you for the next part of the journey, the next ministry. And I remember that coming so alive and real in me. And I thought, this is so amazing. He really does know the path we're supposed to be taking and what we need for the next part of that journey and path. that's one of my mind-blowing experiences in community.
Yeah, it's like to call it, I don't know, like mind blowing. I feel like some of them I only realize in retrospect, even just a few months in, where I don't know, I was frustrated one day or something, but I was journaling and I was at the end of the day, and I just had this moment of like, oh, something similar like this happened like a few years ago, and I am reacting in like such a better way now. And in such a different way than what I would have, and like realizing that like that growth and health of like, oh, suddenly like I've changed patterns to something better and to something that I think God is probably a lot happier with, either in terms of like letting something dwell or talking or something. But it was just that moment that I think for a second I was like, oh, but like, what does this mean about me? Because I had gotten so used to seeing myself in a certain way that suddenly like looking back and seeing this like new thing, I was like, oh, okay, I guess we're growing. And it's good. And I'm just, but yeah, it's been, I think, a lot of very, very small, subtle things where all of a sudden I realize something's changed and just go with it.
So good though. Like that's what, you know what I mean? That's a very awesome, because then you're just like in your bed and you're like, whoa, that was really cool. You know? I have another question as well too. So when entering into formation, is there any like qualifications? Do you need recommendation letters? Like what does that look like in order, like you just walk up to the door and you're like, hey, I'm here, you know, like can anyone kind of like describe like kind of that experience for people who are like ready to take the first step? If they need to pack a bag, like what do they need to do?
Well, I think I know when I started at least candidacy, like the stage before I am right now, I think that I just had to submit a request letter, like requesting to begin this, and then also an autobiography. As that time developed and it was time to ask about postulancy, that I had to submit, I think then I needed recommendation letters from like my spiritual director. I had to go for a psychological evaluation, which is pretty standard. And I mean, whether you're becoming a priest or any order of sisters or brothers, to go through some kind of just to make sure everything's healthy. Medical paperwork, another request letter, sacramental records. I don't know what there is going forward after this, but.
No, I mean, that's good. I think a lot of people, they're not even sure, like, you know, I thought it was like you had to have a lot more, quite honestly, to take that step, you know what I mean? So it's kind of nice to know, like, you know.
What did you have in mind?
I don't know. You know, maybe some like fingerprints here and there, maybe a DNA. No, I'm just kidding. I wasn't sure, like, because we talk about just like candidacy, like, I guess like when entering then into that phase, like, what does that first step look like? Mm-hmm. You know, that first 1 to 2 years, like, are you living with the sisters at this point? Are you stopping by and it's very flexible? What is that looking like for the first step into the door too?
Well, I know for me, at the time I was living and working in the Washington, D.C. area, and I think the closest Felicians are in Philadelphia, so it's not impossible, but because there was a distance and because I was still working, I think the candidate director came down to visit me once or twice. I went to visit her in Connecticut. I visited her with Sister Judy and Sister Desiree in Pittsburgh, and we had Zoom calls and other classes reading about, again, St. Francis and Blessed Angela, to keep that contact up. But it was, at least for me, like a little bit more, I'm not going to say informal, but because I had other commitments that they didn't want to ask me to break yet, I wasn't living with the sisters, but I know we currently have a candidate who is.
I also have been lagging on the Q&A, and there was some other questions. I was ready with my very selfish.
Questions are going to roll from all over from you, so it's all right.
So here's one question. As a sister, was it difficult to leave your family when you entered?
For me, it was. I only lived 3 hours south of Lodi, New Jersey, where I entered, and it seemed like miles away and hours away. It was my first real leaving of home because I went to college. It was local. So it was very difficult for me. I remember being in a very sad state a couple of weeks into postulancy, and the novice director saw me on the stairway and she asked me if I needed some TLC, and I didn't even know what TLC was. I thought it was some little conference or whatever. And I said, no, I don't need that. And later on, she saw me and she said, do you know what TLC means? And I said, no, I don't. I had to admit that. And she said, it just means tender, loving care. And I just burst into tears, and she held me for a little bit. And it was, you can't, I loved my family, so.
I hate to cut us off, but remember, tomorrow we do have a question and answer session. So in the morning at 10 a.m. Eastern time, so 7 a.m. for California, 8 Mountain Time, and 9 Central Time. So if you want to join back in, we'll have Monica, our candidate, and she can answer other questions as well. I can also answer some questions. But as usual, it was really good to be with you all. And I don't know if anyone has any last closing comments before Sister ends us with prayer.
This was great.
Yeah.
Closing comment.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mine is from Thomas Merton, and it's his prayer for guidance and discernment. Oh Lord God, I have no idea where I am going. I do not see the road ahead of me. I cannot know for certain where it will end, nor do I really know myself. And that fact that I think I am following your will does not mean that I am actually doing so. But I believe that the desire to please you does in fact please you. And I hope I have that desire in all that I am doing. I hope that I will never do anything apart from that desire to please you. And I know that if I do this, you will lead me by the right road, though I may know nothing about it. Therefore, I will trust you always, though I may seem to be lost and in the shadow of death, I will not fear, for you are ever with me, and you will never leave me to make my journey alone. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Blessings, blessings, blessings.